Tom, ecstatic to be with you here today to talk a little about the revenue zone and also just the new landscape of selling. So first off, let me jump right in. What was kind of the impetus for the revenue zone, and what is the revenue zone?
Yeah, so the revenue zone came out of a bit of my own personal experience and kind of finding myself in kind of a weird situation, I guess, as it relates to a sales role that I had. So I have a software company. It's a CRM software company. So we work with a lot of companies on their sales and marketing strategy, right? It's, when they're implementing new technologies, they're always at the same time looking at their sales and marketing processes and how they do things and everything like that. And, constantly they're talking to us about how they can do different things to control the sales cycle, right? How can I have more visibility on the sales cycle? And it's almost to the degree in a lot of cases we find that rather than trying to work with the prospects, they're trying to figure out how to fight the prospect to get more of that control and more of that visibility. So that was one thing that I had going on in my world. The second thing is I was in a board meeting a couple of years ago and presenting some sales projections. And one of the board members said, okay, well, how confident do you feel about all this? And I don't know what happened. Like all of a sudden it was like, I don't feel really good about answering that question. And that's not really been my past, right? I've always been really confident when I put up projections and I realized that, a lot of this was kind of guessing. And so it was kind of that punch in the stomach moment, so to speak. So kind of taking those two things of my personal sort of punch in the stomach and then what we were seeing with clients, I took the step back and I said, man, there has got to be a better way to be going about this. And that was kind of the genesis of the revenue zone journey, which started a little over a couple of years ago. So yeah, a couple of things brought together.
Yeah, I mean, we write what we know, right, Tom? So I think it's great that you're able to kind of funnel that in. And what I like about the revenue zone is that it's a blueprint. It makes it very clear how somebody can go about this in the new landscape, the new ecosystem of sales. There's a lot of new parameters. I think that there's a lot of elements like relationships and understanding the resources that will always transcend in sales. But to your point, with great detail, sometimes around the data comes great responsibility. And I think understanding how to really leverage it and inform our actions and, where we tweak our process is a lot more important than trying to control every variable. Certainly you control what you can, but oftentimes it's, how you go out and execute that makes all the difference in the world. So what are your thoughts on, kind of the new landscape of selling? What's important? What should we be thinking about? What maybe should we let go of the old ways of selling?
Yeah, so and it's really important. It's one of the things I start off in the book with is a mindset shift, right? So first of all, the mindset of as the sales and marketing organization that I have to be in control of every step. You have to change that mindset to realize that the buyer is in control and the buyer can be in control, right? And the buyer will do what they want to do. So then the question becomes is how do you enable the buyer to, go down the road that you want them to go down and to get the outcome that you want to come out of. So rather than trying to control everything, take a different mindset and say, how do you enable? And, there's a lot of conversation now, a lot of even with Gartner and a lot of the big analysts about buyer enablement and the importance of buyer enablement. But there hasn't been a lot of talk of how do you actually do that? It's easy to talk about, but how do you do that? So yeah, that's what I then go into in the book is that once you sort of have that mindset of, okay, how am I going to enable the buyer, help the buyer, guide the buyer, help them make sense of their journey rather than trying to control it or do everything on my process and my timeline and whatever. If I just change that mindset and shift that, easily, it really starts to open up a whole lot of other interesting ways of doing things. And that's what a lot of what's outlined in the book talks about.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's key, Tom, that we we kind of meet the customer where they are.
Yeah,
We've all
exactly.
read the statistic that customers are 57% of the way down the buying journey before they engage a seller, but there's certainly ways that we can show up in a meaningful way. I know one of the topics that you're passionate about is, how do we shift toward, kind of that millennial, meeting them where they are, from a marketing and from a sales perspective. There's a new way and new ways that our customer and our target audience gets information. They're very video centric.
Hmm.
They're very, text or social centric. And, just in recent years, I've had a lot of success shifting toward a digital selling mindset, meeting customers where they are and showing up, whether it's with free technical briefings, building a community around what we're doing, as opposed to just picking up the phone and trying to get buyers on the phone. Had a lot of success that way. A lot of the same principles and fundamentals apply, right? But we show up differently.
Exactly. And even in the early stages, right, of the prospecting part of it, I don't know about you, but I get, probably 20 emails a day that say, hey, can we jump on a call? Right. I don't even know what these companies do.
Yeah.
Furthermore, so I don't even know why I would jump on a call, but certainly I'm not going to jump on a call. Yet I have a feeling that a lot of the companies that I get emails from probably have a product or a service that I could be interested in.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't even given them the opportunity to find out. So if I get an email that says, something more, along what you said, but what you do a lot in social selling, right? You understand their problem a bit more and say, hey, you might be interested in this. Here are 3 pieces of content or a video or whatever. Go ahead and check it out, right? That's it. Check it out. And if you have any questions, I'm here. So they're not requesting the phone call. Now it's very likely if it's something that, piques my interest, I'll at least go check it out. Right. And that's, if you talk about it, when I talk about the yellow brick road in the book, that's that first step, right, of going down that yellow brick road. But as a prospect, generally, if I find some interest in something, then there's other steps that I'm going to take. On average, there's different statistics, but between 25 and say 50 touch points that a buyer goes through before they're even like ready to be considering talking to a salesperson or seriously doing business with the company, right? Well, how can you help guide that prospect down those 25 steps or 50 steps or whatever it may be for your product or service in a way that you are controlling it because you're providing them the right information at the right time and you're giving them the right thing. So if I get a video and says, watch this video, at the end of the video or even in the caption or whatever, say, okay, recommended next step as an example, you might want to check out this, and this. That's valuable to me. So I don't have to go Google and search all over the place and try and figure out the rabbit hole that I'm going to go down and a lot of times get lost and not, and kind of abandon the whole process because it goes into such a rabbit hole. I want to be guided along and talking to not just millennials, but a lot of millennials. That's what I kept hearing over and over. It's just like, help me, give me that guide, give me that direction. Let me do my research, but help me along the way. And don't be just, okay, when are we getting on the call? When are you going to buy? The typical sales process, the salesy aspect of things.
Totally. Tom, you said something super important that I want to sit in for a second, and it's that sometimes it can take these 25 to 50 touch points that are meaningful. And frankly, sometimes we never even know exactly what, we don't know the magical combination, right? There's a litany of factors that can lead there, but I'm a big believer in probability. And I think the more of these quality touches and these quality touch points that we can have along the way, you enhance your probability. And I also believe that it's oftentimes a very wide net and wide array of mediums that can be part of that
Absolutely.
magical combination. And so what I mean by that is they may see a blog or an article that I shared. We're connected, let's say, with my buyer on LinkedIn, and they may see an article that I shared. They didn't like or comment. They didn't necessarily engage, but they see a point of view that I'm showing up with, and they say, hey, that's valuable. And it's a way that we can show up and stay top of mind. Now, a lot of sellers, I don't know that we may believe in the value of digital selling, and we may believe in the value of posting some of these things, but we don't execute consistently over time because there's not an immediate return on investment. And because of that, we're not investing enough. I think generally as sellers, and I think that's why to your point, we've got to understand the long game.
Yep.
A lot of enterprise and B2B sales cycles can be years. And so you never know. You invite somebody to a webinar here, you engage them with a message or a survey around different points of view there. These are all things that can take them down that winding yellow brick road.
Yeah, and I found there's a couple of things I want to make sure I touch on what you just said, because I found, first of all, that when you do provide that yellow brick road, generally the prospect's going to move faster. Two things: they're going to move faster, we found, because you're giving them the guide, right? And they're not getting lost or getting ultra confused, which can very much happen. And confused prospects don't make customers. And then the second thing we found is that it can really provide a competitive advantage. Like if you're in a competitive situation and you're providing that yellow brick road or that guidance, you're going to knock out the competitor because they're not doing that, right? So we found that to be true in the data we've been tracking. But the question becomes, what you were just saying is, how do you know what those 25 steps are, or those 50 steps? And what I go through in the book, and there's even a tool I provide that you can download as you're going through this, is take a successful or a couple of successful sales processes or sales events that you've gone through, reverse engineer it, and you're going to find there's some key touch points along the way that were common, right? And we've done this before. Like, and I'm just going to give you an simple example. We found with our software company that if the customer or the prospect, watched a certain video about what we do, watched the video about the product, then they did a customer case study, blah, blah, and down the road, we found that there were some key milestones or some key touch points along the way that every one of our successful sales cycles tended to go down.
Yep.
Right. And so by reverse engineering that, it's okay, then let's see if we can get more of those going down that same road. And that's where the yellow brick road starts to develop. And then you can optimize it over time, right? It's like, it's not something that has to be perfect day one, but you can track and optimize and keep building on that more and more, and then sending more and more people down that.
Love that so much. You said earlier in the conversation something that I really want to double down on, which is, you get a lot of messages, right? And I was reading a statistic, a lot of C-level executives, they may get thousands of messages in a month from different sellers. And I've talked to C-level executives about, what did make it stand out, and things that you can do to personalize these, things that you can do to differentiate. Everybody selected a competitor for a very valid reason, right? Mm-hmm. So you're not going to win if you go toe to toe based on the strengths of your competitor. You're going to win if you can uncover what might be an opportunity or a threat or a detractor of that competitor where you're strong. And mm-hmm. I think finding ways to stand out, both from a competitive standpoint, but also that's where incorporating video into your prospecting messages, sure. Or finding different ways to execute better sales plays, taking that counterintuitive approach. I remember years ago, I overhauled my entire prospecting process because of the feedback that I was getting from the executives that I was talking to. They were always saying, you're more expensive, or we're already doing business and you're the biggest check we write. Why would we want to pay you more? And so I took a counterintuitive approach and really doubled down on how could I help infuse more value into the relationship that they had, or show up with free value, or show up with point of view, even if it was just to have a conversation. This is something that I've observed that is transpiring in your industry, or this is something from your press release recently or company reports.
Right.
Would love to understand better how you're tackling this. Here's some point of view from some executives in our organization, that kind of thing. How can you have a sales play that enhances effectiveness of your approach? And that's why I like what you said about those 25 to 50 different touch points. You're going to learn over time what works, what doesn't, what has a higher probability of addressing that, and let the data help you diagnose the process along the way.
Well, the data is key, right? So I'm originally a software engineer, so I have a degree in computer science, and I'm an engineer, so I love data. And there's a tremendous amount of there's a tremendous amount of ways of using that data very positively to not just spy. People, you're spying on the prospect and it's kind of spooky. And no, don't spy on the prospect. Use it to make their experience better, right? They're going to appreciate it, and you're going to appreciate it, because you're going to be able to see you're getting more prospects moving through that yellow brick road through that touch point all the way along the way. And a lot of there's a chapter in the book, it's called the Revenue Zone Tech Stack. And the technologies, a lot of them that I even talk about in there, most companies already have or have some form of it. They're just not using it for this purpose of helping to really sort of keep that optimization of that yellow brick road and moving people into what I call the revenue zone. So yeah, we have it. Let's take advantage of it in a positive way.
Love that. One of my barometers for great sales books is having that blueprint and template. And then the latter part of the book, I know you really dive into like, okay, these are actionable things you can go out today to establish a process, recalibrate over time. That's what's so important. There's so many listening tools that are out there right now that you can see, kind of intent or, what your customer is talking about, what they're thinking about. And so I encourage sellers, because knowledge is, at the end of the day, one of the most important attributes. Understanding, what do I need to show up caring about? What does my customer care about? What looks like a win to them? That's why they're going to talk to you. That's why they're going to do business with you. Now, granted, all of the old things still apply too. You've got to make sure you invest in the relationship, you show up, you're communicative, you're transparent. But these listening tools and the ability to meet them digitally with these new ways, that's what's going to help you stand out amongst all the noise. So I think I love marrying kind of your approach of, this practical application with, how we can enhance our process. And to your point, not spying on customers, but showing up, talking about what they care about.
Yeah, it goes right back to the first thing we were talking about, is mindset, right? If my mindset is, I am going to help enable the buyer go through their journey and the experience the way that they want to, right? And then I work to do that, then I'll win. If I'm trying to fight that experience or fight the way that they want to do it or create my own experience because it's more self-serving, I'm not likely going to be very successful, certainly on a scalable level and over a long-term basis. So, the whole goal in this is to be able to get more and more prospects through into your process and get more results because you're enabling them in what they want to do.
If you were to give our audience today some actionable steps that they could take right now to better approach the foundation that they have to selling and enhance their process, what would that be?
Yeah, so the title of the book is called The Revenue Zone. And what I mean by the revenue, or how I define it in the book, is the revenue zone is a place where the prospect is actually seriously considering spending money with your business. So they may not have bought yet, they may not have the contract, but they're at that point where there's enough demand and excitement for what you do, and there's enough trust for what you do that they're willing to consider moving forward. Okay. So the very first thing I do is I said, okay, for that to happen for your business, and I think this is the first step that, to kind of start implementing this process that a company should look for, is what are 3 things that the customer or the prospect would need to understand about your product or service or business? And what would be 3 beliefs that they would need to have about your product, service, or your business to be in the revenue zone? Okay, to the point where they're willing to seriously consider doing business with you. Well, you could say, for me, it could be, well, they understand how our products helps them make sales. It helps them, they understand these key features and so forth. But they also have to believe that this is going to provide a good return on investment. It's going to believe that their sales team are going to use it and get value out of it, right? So there's a set of kind of 3 key beliefs, and then there's a 3 set of, and again, you could have 20. I just say keep it simple. Pick 3 of each, and know that if you have those 3 understandings and you have those 3 beliefs, you're likely going to have a prospect in the revenue zone. So that's the first thing, right? That's something you can kind of whiteboard out. Then again, work backwards and say, okay, what has to occur then to get to that point? And that's where those touch points start to come into play in the yellow brick road. How do I guide the prospect through the, knowing that they want to guide their own journey? So how do I enable that prospect to get to the point where they have those understandings and they have those beliefs, and I just engineer everything to that point? But starting with, what does it mean to be in the revenue zone, right? That's a very, very first step, that if you don't know that, then you're obviously not going to be able to engineer the road to get there.
I love that. I could also make a lot of really clever yellow brick road analogies, like you got to have brains, heart, and courage to get to the revenue zone too. But
man, how come I didn't think of that? That's good.
at the end of it, I'm not trademarking it, so feel free to steal that.
Okay.
But you know what's amazing, Tom, is like at the end of it, you've got to figure out how do I de-risk this for the customer, and everything that you've articulated here really does that, because you're making it a conducive ground, fertile ground for them to make the decision, because you've kind of figured out where they are, what. And then you're asking yourself, you're challenging yourself with those provocative questions like, what steps can I take? What touches can I make that get them closer in the revenue zone? I think that's key. And then how do I deliver a win? How do I deliver a win for them? I've had so many customer scenarios over the years, even contentious ones, where at the end of it, I said, all things aside, I don't win unless you do. I need to understand what that looks like. Do you need something from a budgetary perspective? Where does it need to be from an ROI perspective? What are the major challenges that you're having today with the competing company? Help me understand those elements and what looks like a win to you. And at the end of it, if you deliver that win and you keep obviously a very holistic approach. The customer has to win, your organization's got to win, and ideally you and your team win as well. I mean, you figure out how to optimize payout, but at the end of it, like, nobody wins unless the customer wins too. And so I think figuring out how you can de-risk that decision for them and deliver what looks like a win to them, you're in the ballpark, you're in the revenue zone.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to sanity check what I was just going through, right? If you say, here are the 3 understandings and the 3 beliefs, if I take a step back from that, is that a winning situation then, right? How does the prospect win by having that understanding and those beliefs as it relates to you? So I think it's a good way to sanity check those as well. We've gone through this exercise with a few different companies. It's a very fun exercise, and it's very interesting that most people don't know why somebody buys from them in a lot of cases, or what causes them to be in the revenue zone and seriously considering doing business. It's not just because they like the features of your product, or they know something about,
Yeah, and ask them, like, when you have a good buying relationship, good buying customer relationship, understand the things that helped you win and figure out, how do I parlay that into the next conversation? I think something that's really key in all of this is that, oftentimes, look at the resources that you have, the investments that you can make and that you're willing to make, the areas where you're strong, where your competition isn't. And sometimes it's about even taking a proactive stab at saying, look, these are areas that we want to invest. These are things that we think we could do that would be meaningful together. And these are who maybe we think should be the right appropriate parties, or how things should be aligned, or, put a blueprint out there proactively, and then put the onus on the customer. Hey, keep us honest. Like, if this, if there's things that you want to tweak to this or change to this program, absolutely, let's do that. But this is how, one of the ways that we see things and ways that we've been successful working with customers of your ilk. From there, please, feedback, guidance. These are the things that are going to be helpful. But I think if we show up like that, it just gives us it makes that fertile ground. It can make it a lot more conducive to be in the revenue zone.
Well, and what you just described again is another sort of rule I put in the book, right? Is be that trusted advisor.
That's it.
So
that's rule number 1.
That's rule number 1. Yeah, it's like rule number 1 is be that trusted advisor, because if you take that mindset and that mentality, first of all, it just puts you in a different place than the salesperson, right? It's like you're at a different altitude and a different level of credibility with them. And, I've worked with a lot of salespeople that certainly, they have that ability and they're not using it. They're not using that ability to be that trusted advisor and really help the customer. And it just helps everybody, right? Everyone feels good at the end of the day that, they've helped somebody get to where they needed to go.
Yeah, I mean, your goal should be to land the next step. You can't be thinking about the sale that's going to happen 6 months, a year from now, 2 years from now, right out of the gate. You've got to make sure that you establish that relationship first. I've had scenarios where I've recommended a competitor because it was the right move in that situation. But guess what? Now that customer knows that they can come back to me and that I'm going to give them good feedback, good advice, good guidance. And those are the types of relationships that beget deals. I've also had a lot of customers where they indicated, I can't buy today. I can't buy from you today. We've got this existing contract, whatever it is. But guess what? If I invest in that relationship and that customer goes elsewhere, maybe they can do business with me in their next organization. You just
Sure.
never know. So invest in the relationship, seek to be the trusted advisor first, and you'll be surprised where it can go. The other thing too is, Tom, a lot of times we can develop that great buying relationship at one organization, and executives may split off, go to other places,
Sure.
and guess what? Now you have a presence everywhere.
Sure.
It
Absolutely.
multiplies. So, be very mindful of how you invest in those relationships.
Right, because you're looked at as a trusted advisor. You're not looked at as, somebody who's just a salesperson for a certain organization. It's somebody they can trust regardless of where they are or what they're looking at. So there's a lot of valuable side effects, so to speak, that can come out of, that shift.
Well said. Well said. So, Tom, I'm going to give you the last word. Where can we get the Revenue Zone and anything else, any other knowledge you'd want to impart today?
Yeah, so the book is on Amazon. And we also have a website called therevenuezone.com. One of the things we've done, I mentioned a tool, we've built quite an extensive resource center. So as you're going through the book, there's some tools to use to define the yellow brick road. There's quite a bit of additional supplemental material that we've put on there, especially related to technology, because it changes all the time, right? So it's hard to write about technology in a book. You're going to be out of date by the minute you're done. So we're trying to keep up on what are the different technology options, and then just also sharing what we're learning with other companies that are doing this, so we can share the best practices and all of that, because this is the early stages of this shift. And there's no way I'm going to sit here and say we have it all figured out. I think we have a structure that we can start working against and optimizing, and we can measure against and see the results, and we're going to learn a lot along the way. But my goal is to just see more and more companies adopt this approach, and I know as a result of that, they're going to have happier prospects and happier customers. And again, kind of touching on that millennial, right? That is exactly how millennials want to do business, and the millennial is going to be the primary B2B buyer, if not now, very, very soon. So all of that I just is a win-win for everybody. But yeah, think about that. Again, just I guess some final thoughts would be, think about what it would mean to be in the revenue zone for your company. We kind of covered that early in the book, and then just start looking at those mindset shifts. And it's pretty magical. And what will actually happen, what we found is when people change and look at things a little bit differently, there's some magical outcomes that can occur, which fits well with my yellow brick road analogy. So,
Tom, thank you. This was great. So everybody go out and check out the Revenue Zone. Good luck with the Revenue Zone, Tom. Thanks for all the knowledge that you shared with us today. Like you said, it all starts with mindset, but there's a lot of things that we can do, practical application that will enhance our process, how we show up with customers, and how we get into the Revenue Zone. So thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks, Carson. Great to be here.